Alright, so I'm gonna be honest here. Initially, this video was going to be on Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, a game I've been very excited to finally play. But at the last minute, I remembered, oh right, Rising's a thing! Released a couple of years ago, Eiyuden Chronicle Rising was a stretch goal for 100 Heroes Kickstarter campaign, with it being made as both a way to help tide over fans and as a companion prequel to it. We'll go over the Kickstarter campaign and anything else that's relevant more when we get to 100 Heroes, but the important part here is that Rising wasn't required to play it all in order to understand the main game. Rising story-wise exists as a way to introduce you to some of the characters in the base game early, and give you a small taste for the world of Eiyuden Chronicle. Honestly, the whole reason I'm covering this game before 100 Heroes is because it both came out first, and like I said before, it's a prequel to the main game. I'm not too comfortable jumping into that game without at least having talked about Rising first. Now that being said though, with me having been busy with the channel and also having so many other games to play, I haven't actually gotten around to playing this game at all until this video. And while I now fully understand why the reception for it was so mixed across the board, I'm not gonna lie, I had a fairly great time with Rising. It's got its issues for sure, and gameplay-wise it definitely won't appeal to everyone at all, but for someone like me, Eiyuden Chronicle Rising was a lot of fun, and the small taste of the world I got did have me really interested in learning more about it. So join me while I explain to you in a lot more detail exactly why I had a great time with Eiyuden Chronicle Rising. The story of Rising takes place in the rural mining town of New Neva, which has recently become a bit of a hotspot for adventurers. See, at some point before the start of the game, New Neva dealt with a nasty earthquake that opened the way to a set of ancient ruins they call the Rune Barrows. Because ancient untouched ruins usually equals treasure, adventurers from far and wide travel to New Neva in hopes they might make themselves a fortune, which brings us to the first of our three protagonists, CJ. Unlike the other adventuring outlanders, as the New Nevans call them, CJ considers herself an honorable scavenger, and also unlike them, she ain't here to make bank. See, CJ's currently going through her family's rite of passage. Basically, she can't go home until she finds a treasure bigger than what her father found, with that having been a massive raw lens, with raw lenses being, as far as I understand it, powerful pieces of magical glass that can grant people powers when imbued with runes and made into a rune lens. As time goes on though, CJ eventually teams up with our other two protagonists, with them being a kangaroo beast and mercenary named Guru and the town's acting mayor Isha, both for the needed help and in Isha's case, some more personal reasons I won't go into for spoiler reasons. What I will say though is that it's clear something deeper's going on here, with the influx of these bandits after specifically people's rune lenses and this supposed mysterious curse from the sorcerer, a powerful and evil man who was sealed away in the Rune Barrows hundreds of years ago. The story of Eiyuden Chronicle Rising is pretty simple, and for what it's trying to be, I think it works pretty well. The game exists to be a small companion piece to a much larger story. You won't get anything complex or super twisty, but what you do get is a short, fun adventure with our trio here. And on that note, our three protagonists are definitely the star of the show here. CJ, Guru, and Isha are all great, and I loved their chemistry with each other. They had plenty of funnier interactions with each other, especially with Guru and CJ, but honestly, I was kind of surprised by how wholesome some of the interactions these three had with each other were. Individually though, I obviously did still like all of them a lot. CJ was just a fun character in general, and I loved her slow descent into getting addicted to helping people in town through its stamp system. Guru surprised me with how wise and fatherly he could be at points, and I really liked his friendship with CJ. They kind of felt like bickering siblings at points. And as for Isha, while I obviously do just like her character in general, I gotta say, her part of the overall plot is easily its strongest aspect. By the end of the game, these three all felt like a group of really great friends, and I'm really looking forward to seeing them again when I get to 100 Heroes. But a lot of what I just said about them does actually extend to some of the other residents, though. Rising has plenty of charm to it, and that's not all because of these three. The other residents of New Neva have plenty of personality themselves. The game has a nice sense of humor to it. You're bound to find at least a couple of lines that make you chuckle or catch you off guard. Like some of the side quests with Georg, who really does not think through some of the things he says. The plot itself may not be anything to write home about, but the writing and its characters do add a good bit to the experience for me. And while I unfortunately don't have a ton to say about the story as a whole, for what it's worth, like I said before, the game did get me even more interested in learning more about this world and what certain elements of Rising's story will lead to in 100 Heroes. Now, as for Rising's presentation though, visually speaking, I honestly don't really have much to say at all. The game does look nice, but there's not really anything that majorly stands out for me as far as Rising's area design goes. I do, however, want to give a quick shout out to the artwork for the characters, because the designs and the art for everyone look really good. The game's character designer, Junko Kawano, who also worked on all of the Suikoden games, did a really great job here, with my personal favorite design being Isha's. I also really like the soundtrack. The area themes all sound really good, with Snow Peaks being my personal favorite of them for how tranquil it sounds. And I also kinda love Nuneva's third town theme. It just sounds so lively and upbeat. Now, as for the gameplay though, Rising definitely isn't gonna be for everyone, but before I explain why, let's go over some of the basics in combat first. For starters, unlike its turn-based counterpart, Rising is a side-scrolling action RPG. While you're away from Nuneva, you, as CJ, Guru, and Isha, will be gathering resources and battling enemies, with each character's attack being assigned to one of 3 different buttons, with only one of them being out at any point in time, and all of them having only one basic combo. Each character also has a unique skill and other abilities they can use for combat and even exploration. For starters, CJ has a dash that gives her invincibility frames, which can eventually let you dash mid-air. Frankly, CJ was the character I played as the most, due partly because of her dash abilities, and also because of the double jump she eventually gets. Honestly, out of the 3 main characters, she just felt the fastest and most fun to run around with. Guru can block enemy attacks with his sword, and can even parry certain ranged attacks back at enemies. While this doesn't pertain to his unique skill at all, it's worth mentioning that Guru also has the highest capacity for breaking an enemy's shields if they have one, like some of these ogre enemies and bosses. And finally, we have Isha, whose unique skills consist of a very short-range teleport that I personally didn't get any use out of, oddly enough, and a hover that I'm pretty sure I only got use out of once, so out of all 3 characters, Isha is sadly the weak link in this regard. Combat-wise though, she's pretty useful, with her being the only party member capable of ranged attacks. Now with that being said, there is a bit more to the combat though. First off, along with accessories, every character will eventually be able to equip elemental runes to either an attack or defense slot. This can give them some protection against certain other elements, and if equipped to an attack slot, it'll let you deal more or less damage based on the element of the enemy in question, with them also letting you break down these color-coded rocks if you have the right rune. Secondly, we have link attacks, and let me tell you, these are easily my favorite part of the combat in Rising. See, at any point while one character is in the middle of a combo, you can press the button assigned to another character to have them immediately swap out for a hard-hitting attack, and you can even chain these together. At the start of the game, you can only chain 2 of these together, but as you do more side quests and max out your stamp cards, more on that later, you'll increase the link attack chain limit by 1 for each card completed, with the maximum being 5 by the end of the game. A big reason why I love these so much though isn't just because they do a lot of damage, but also because they just feel so good to use. Like there's just this nice punch to them that makes link attacks feel incredibly satisfying. Especially with Guru, whose sword can easily hit or even beat multiple enemies at once. As a whole though, the combat's pretty simple, but for me I thought it was pretty fun, and for what this game is, it works, especially since the game's not too long at all, with me having beaten it at around 13 hours. If you're someone who needs a bit more challenge though, you might have some trouble enjoying it because the game's difficulty is pretty easy, and hard mode, for some baffling reason, is only unlocked once you beat the game. Besides that though, if I had to criticize anything, I'd say that I don't really like that CJ only starts out with a 2-hit combo. See, each character in the game can upgrade their weapon at Bertrand's weapon shop, and when they do, they can unlock a new attack options or an extra attack for their combo, and CJ starting out with only 2 hits just makes the early game feel a bit too slow for me. Now with all of that being said, this is where we have to get to the aspect of Rising that'll easily make or break the game for you, so let's talk resource collecting and side quests. While CJ's main goal is exploring the rune barrows and finding treasure, the town and people of Nuneva are in desperate need of help rebuilding after the earthquake. This brings us to the stamp card system I brought up a moment ago. In an effort to encourage Outlanders to help people with their requests, Isha gave every resident a stamp, and every Outlander who would accept one a stamp card. By doing side quests and even some main story quests, you'll almost always get a stamp, which nets you 2 different sets of rewards. Once you have Hogan's trading post set up, you can get a reward from him for every 10 stamps you've earned. And when you fill up a whole card, the town will expand and you'll get another link chain like I said earlier. That being said though, the main problem here a lot of people will have is that basically every side quest and even some main ones are fetch quests, where you'll need to collect resources from one of the game's main areas. Now, gathering resources is already pretty important since you'll need them for crafting items to use, upgrading or leveling up your weapons as well as armor, or even making food items that heal and give permanent stat boosts. Combine this with the side quests though, as well as how many there are in that there's 160 of them, and this means you're gonna have to do a lot of farming. Sure, you could skip doing a lot of them since they are optional, but this will mean you'll have to lose out on a lot of experience, money, and very useful upgrades and expansions to all of your shops. As far as I can tell, this is one of, if not the largest problems people had with the game. But I'm not gonna lie here, I kinda love gameplay structures like this. Like, don't get me wrong, I totally understand why this isn't going to appeal to a lot of people. For most, this will inevitably feel tedious and understandably a little boring. I mean, heck, even I have problems with this, like how so many quests just consist of you talking to 1 or 2 people and then you're done. But for me personally, I love this for a few reasons. First off, having a big list of objectives I can complete quickly or that I can keep track of over the course of the game has always been something I've really enjoyed. It always feels like I'm doing something productive and working towards some kind of goal. It's incredibly satisfying and the big reason I love games like Pikmin or Ever Oasis, if you've ever heard of that game at all. I also just love the feeling of building back up towns like New Neva in games. I just get this nice sense of accomplishment seeing the place go from run down to bustling by the end, and knowing that I played a big part in that. This whole gameplay structure just really appeals to me, and it's the biggest reason why I had such a great time in Rising, but just because I had fun doesn't mean I don't recognize the problems here. Like I said, for a lot of people, it's gonna feel tedious or boring. And honestly, there definitely could have been some more interesting side quests in the game that weren't just get me X things or talk to this dude for me. Honestly, if you're someone who can put up with Rising's gameplay structure, or you're the kind of player who just enjoys this sort of thing, I'd say Rising's worth your time. It's fairly short as far as action RPGs go, but at $15, I don't think that's really a problem at all. But hey, if it's not your cup of tea, like I mentioned at the start of the video, Rising isn't required to play in the slightest to enjoy 100 Heroes. As a companion to the main game, I'd say Eiyuden Chronicle Rising does its job well enough. Honestly though, while I enjoyed my time with this one, I gotta say, I'm even more excited to finally get around to playing 100 Heroes now, both so I can see more of this world and especially so I can see more of these 3. But until then, thank you all for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I hope you all have a nice day.